And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Flying weather for Monday morning. IFR, Brooks Range out to the Arctic coast. Marginal VFR, though, for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, down across the Brooks Range and through the east central interior here, right on down into the Gulf of Alaska, with IFR hung up along the central and western Alaska range. Good VFR out here to the west that extends across much of the northern central Bering Sea. And then marginal VFR down toward the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians. And the next storm pushing some IFR in toward the western Aleutians by tomorrow morning. And for the southeast coast, central and eastern inside waters, pretty much covered in IFR with marginal conditions elsewhere. Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, VFR. For the afternoon, we've got marginal VFR here for the southeast coast, up to Yakutat, westward to Cape Yakataga, and then northward over the eastern interior, marginal VFR. Some of that lingering here over the Copper River Basin to the Talkeetna Mountains, even the Chugach Mountains down to the Kenai Peninsula and along the western Alaska Range. Otherwise, VFR here along much of the Yukon River, Kuskokwim Valley, down into Bristol Bay out to Nunivak Island. And up to the north, IFR here, central, western, Arctic coast. And then batch IFR with the next storm pushing into Adak and covering much of the southwestern Bering Sea. That continues to advance eastward here to the eastern Aleutians for Tuesday morning, extending back to about Amchitka Island with marginal VFR to the east. VFR pinching off here over the northern Bering Sea, but holding from Nunivak Island up to Gamble and Savunga. Marginal VFR along the west coast, IFR for the central western Arctic coast and north slope down to the Brooks Range, maybe almost into the Noatak Valley. And VFR here over the central interior, but still looking at some lower conditions for the Alaska Range and into the Tanana Valley there, with IFR mainly over the eastern Copper River Basin, North Gulf Coast, northern and eastern Panhandle, with VFR now covering the Gulf of Alaska, all the way to Kodiak Island, northeast Bristol Bay, and the Kenai Peninsula area into the southern Susitna Valley. For the afternoon, we've got IFR advancing eastward here with the front to the Alaska Peninsula, back up across the Pribilof Islands into the Bering Sea, improving behind the front there with marginal VFR extending westward to Adak, and then VFR from there on to the west. And a pretty good area of VFR here over the west central interior down to Cook Inlet. Marginal VFR, though, spreading into Kodiak Island. A lot of IFR up here north of the Brooks Range to the Arctic Ocean. And then scattered IFR over the southeast interior as well as the southeast coast. Passes for Anatuvik and Anigan both passes look pretty marginal during the day tomorrow, maybe better in the afternoon than they will be in the morning, with Lake Clark and Merrill occasionally marginal and occasional marginal VFR for rainy, marginal VFR for windy, and Isabel and Mentasta all looking marginal, as well as Tanita, marginal VFR there, and Portage, marginal VFR, especially on the eastern entrance, with Chilkoot and White, IFR to start, but gradual improvement throughout the day becoming marginal VFR. And for the freezing levels, 2,000 feet here, all the way down into northern Bristol Bay at the surface tomorrow morning, right down to just south of Norton Sound there, and then back up through the Bering Strait. 2,000 to 4,000 feet here, or actually 4,000 feet or so over the southeast interior, 6,000 to 8,000 feet over the southern southeast coast, and 6,000 to 8,000 foot freezing levels also for the western Aleutians. And from there, taking a look at icing, next good system here pushing a pretty broad area of considerable moderate rime icing along and ahead of the front, right into the central Aleutians, and then back to the northwest there into the Bering, and then over here to the over the eastern part of the state, looking at areas of considerable moderate icing as well from the Brooks Range all the way down across the southeast coast. And taking a look at the 33,000 foot wind flow chart, basically low center here just south of the North Gulf Coast, but that's the center of a very broad trough through this area with 135 knot winds out of the west and then northwest across the Alaska Peninsula, going down off the chart, coming back up, and now cutting across the Queen Charlotte Islands. That's the core of the jet now in that area, say 135 knots with lighter winds over the southeast coast. But 9,000 foot winds with the low center here in the northern Gulf, southwesterlies continue to push moisture into the panhandle. In fact, a pretty strong system there pulling up along and off the coast later tonight and early tomorrow. Kind of pulls back into this position here at 9,000 feet, a little farther to the west than it will be at the surface, but still looking at 45 to 60 knot winds here blowing across the southeast coast and northwest at 45 knots for the Alaska Peninsula, and then some really strong winds out west with that next system along into the western Bering Sea. And ahead of that front, we've got 60 knot winds, 60 to actually 65 knot winds ahead of the front out there to the west, pushing in toward Adak with strong westerlies following in behind. Light here under higher pressure over the eastern Bering Sea in advance of the storm. And then again, this strong low tracking up here, actually another center there near Yakutat, so some good 40 knot winds or so coming into the panhandle, northwest 35 to 40 knots, Barren Islands and down across the Alaska Peninsula. And with that, looking at turbulence, look for considerable moderate turbulence there for the southeast coast, kind of coming from south to north here through the day, and then starting to drop back a little by tomorrow evening, but a pretty bumpy day, especially later tonight and through tomorrow afternoon there for the southeast coast. And then some pretty good mechanical turbulence with northwest winds here for the southern Cook Inlet area, Kamishak Bay, the Aleutian Range, and Kodiak Island. And then another pretty good area, or pretty good chance, likelihood here of seeing some considerable moderate turbulence from the western spreading into the central Aleutians throughout the day.